If we ignore threats, we will simply not exist. So we fight on a continuous basis for our survival. And that is what the West needs to learn from us too, because the West, in today's world, the West is also fighting for its survival.
This is a Visegrad 24 series about the Israel-Hamas War.
My name is Stefan Tompson, and I'm here with another Visegrad 24 interview filmed on the ground in Tel Aviv, Israel. I'm here interviewing experts, journalists, professors, Nazi hunters, influencers, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Eli David. He's an entrepreneur and he's very Twitter famous or X-famous. He's probably one of Israel's greatest shitposters.
Great to be here.
Great to have you, Eli. My first question is this. You're a serious businessman. You've built very serious businesses, and yet you're referred to by The Spectator as snarky and rude. You're very active on Twitter or X. Has this endangered your business interests in any way?
Look, the easiest thing to do is not to speak your mind. Just mind your business, in my case being an entrepreneur, a researcher, and that's fine. But at some point, if each and every one of us in the society do that, then how do we defend what's important for us? We can just lay low and play the life safely, and then what's going to happen? We will be responsible to that by remaining silent. So yes, there are personal prices I am paying for speaking out my mind, but I think that's the duty of everyone who cares about the society they're living in.
Do you think the snarky and rude comments that you make?
I don't think it was snarky and rude, even though that was...
It was actually a comment that you made under Visegrad 24,
yes,
right?
Yes. Look, if I remember correctly, you asked their name one thing Palestinian invented without Googling.
Yeah.
And I added, go ahead and Google. Well, one may say it's snarky and rude, but do go ahead and Google. What have they invented?
What will you find if you Google that?
If you Google that, you will find that they have invented so many different kind of improvised weapons, all various ways to kill Jews. And that's unfortunate. You know, when we left Gaza Strip and gave them full autonomy 2 decades ago, our vision, our dream was to have a kind of Singapore or Dubai there. We lobbied Europeans to give them humanitarian aid money, to build infrastructure so that they would be prosperous. And we here in Israel, here in Tel Aviv, would build our startup nation. It is our tragedy as much as it is theirs that their inventions are improvised weapons.
Rather than tech
pharmaceuticals and technology.
What drives you to care so much when you have a companies to run? What drives you to spend the time that you spend online fighting for Israel's image, fighting for the truth? What is behind this?
Since the massacre on October 7th, my impression is that each person I meet is trying to do what they can. Many are in reserve duty, risking their lives, hundreds sacrificing their lives. Many here in the background try to help in whatever they can. So any person that the nation, the country is important to him is doing whatever they can. And posting publicly and bringing our truth to the world is the little I can. So that's what I'm doing. So it is not in that sense different than what almost every Israeli is doing. Each one of us is just doing what we are capable of. And due to the audience I have, I think I am playing a role in echoing the Israeli sentiment to the world. And that's the only reason I'm doing that.
What is Israel?
The homeland of Jewish people, where we belong even if we have not been here for thousands of years. You know, at every new year, any Jew for the past thousands of years, there is a verse they get to and they say, next year in Jerusalem, in the rebuilt Jerusalem. That's the verse. Jerusalem, capital of Israel, and Israel as a whole. So the return of Jews to Israel, the founding of Israel 1948, we don't view it as something new. We just view it as continuation of the state of Israel that already was here. We were kicked out of here and we managed to come back here. So this is the Jewish state, just like England is the state for the English people, and the Poland is the state for the Polish people. Israel is the state for the Jewish people, wherever they are.
What is the reason that the Western world should care about Israel and care about what happens here? The argument goes in some circles that the US has massive homelessness problems, drug abuse problems, a crisis at the southern border. There's chaos. The US is incapable of even sorting out its domestic issues. Why on earth should it care about what happens in a Middle Eastern country thousands of kilometers away? It's a dozen hours of flight, if not 20-something, depending on where in the US you leave from. Why should the West care?
Unfortunately, terrorism is not limited to Israel or only to Middle East. We have seen, of course, 9/11 attacks. They were unique in their magnitude, but not unique in the frequency. Their terror attacks have been in UK, in France, in Spain, almost every European country.
Every single Arab country where victims are Muslims. Let's not forget about the Muslim victims of fundamentalist Islamic terrorism.
Even more so. I think it was the foreign minister of United Arab Emirates 2 years ago that he absolutely correctly talked to European countries and said, you think you know fundamental jihadists better than us, you don't know them. The risk they pose towards the Western world, the Western values. By the way, in those Western values, I include Arab countries like United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. And those countries, the divide that I see is countries that care about prospering, care about their citizens, care about their economy, their education, about the next generations. Those are part of the Western world, no matter where they are. And there are those that care about destruction, murdering others, bloodshed. We cannot ignore them, because when we ignore them, we're getting hit. Those European countries, we said, okay, forget about terrorism. It's somebody else's problem. They've faced it in their own capitals. Even we, Israel, are guilty of that to some extent. When we evacuated Gaza Strip 2 decades ago, we gave back every inch of it without making sure a moderate Arab government is ruling that. We just evacuated it and wished them good luck. And what did they do? They took all tens of billions of dollars, turned them into advanced machinery for killing us. They built more underground terror tunnels, longer than the London Underground and Paris Metro combined. Imagine the investment there. So any country that ignores terrorism gets hit. The same thing that happens in Israel will happen in other countries. And they're saying that. You just need to listen to their announcement. We will kill infidels wherever they are. We will bring jihad to European and American cities. And they're serious about that. So Israel is a kind of the front line of fight against terrorism. What we stop here will not get to the other European states. What doesn't get stopped here will get there.
What are some of the lessons that the Western countries, Europe, the USA, and others could learn from Israel? What are the fundamental things that Israel has gotten right?
Fight for the values that are important to you. One of the things I see, unfortunately, in many Western countries is the woke trend. The woke trend essentially says, let's ignore the world. Let's see the world as I would like it to be, which is fine. The second part is wrong. The second part is while completely ignoring the way the world actually is. So let's ignore jihadists. Let's ignore the immigrants problem. Let's ignore the education of children. Let's ignore the economy, the safety. Let's ignore, keep ignoring. And the thing is, when you ignore things, they don't get better. They will just get worse and worse. You see many Western countries that cities that I go there after several years I've not been there. And see the immigration problem. Suddenly some neighborhoods that were safe are totally unsafe. By ignoring things, ignoring things is easy. It makes you feel, okay, everything is fine. I don't need to risk myself. I don't need to make hard decisions. But it's just like compounding interest. It gets worse. Israel doesn't have the luxury of ignoring things. Now, we ignored Hamas's rearmament for a period of several years, and we paid dire price. And if we ignore threats, we will simply not exist. We have so many different organizations and countries that state that their goal is destruction of Israel. So we fight on a continuous basis for our survival. And that is what the West needs to learn from us too, because the West, in today's world, the West is also fighting for its survival.
When you see protests across Western capitals, London, Paris, Berlin, New York, Toronto, hundreds of thousands of people marching with Palestinian flags, chanting from the river to the sea, Shahada flags, posters sort of with the Star of David sort of put in the bin. How does that make you feel?
2023 was the year we learned more people will rally and protest in favor of murderers than in favor of babies and infants taken hostage. It was a sobering year for us. Looking at those protests, I see two groups. One, traditional jihadists, anti-Semites. That's not new. Maybe bigger masses, that's not new. But a large part of them are not traditional jihadists and anti-Semites. They are the result of the woke movement. The other day I saw an interview, Noah Tishby, the Israeli actress, who is walking amongst those protesters chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." And she just asking them one question: which river and which sea it is? None of them knew. One of them says it's the Red Sea, I think. They have no idea. They have no idea that the Jordan River and Mediterranean Sea is essentially entire Israel. It's a call for doing what happened in 7th of October again and again in entire Israel. That's the call. I think most of those people chanting that in Harvard and MIT and Ivy League universities, they don't know what it is. They just know it is trendy. It makes them feel good about themselves. And I see commonalities between this, let's call them the Palestine cult, with the BLM cult, the climate cult, the COVID cult. COVID was real, it was a disease. But the way it was turned into a cult, if you don't get your 5th booster, you will get kicked out of Harvard. That was real.
Sure.
That was a cult. The climate, we all care about climate. There's a climate science. But see what Greta is doing? That's a cult. And she unmasked herself with the Free Palestine stuff. And this is another cult. And this cult is a risk to Israel, but a bigger risk to Western society. The best universities in the West are producing the dumbest people in the world that are just following a cult. What does that mean about the future of our economies, our societies, our technology?
Your fight, Ali, is in the information space. Your primary battlefield is the online arena. It's the social media platforms. To what extent are we under threat by this unholy alliance between Russia, China, Iran, and their acolytes, be it Hamas in Gaza, be it Fatah in the West Bank, and the Houthis in Yemen? To what extent do you feel that they are manipulating this battlefield, that there are bot accounts, that there are bought influencers and activists? Tell me about that landscape you're fighting in.
It is a scary landscape, and it is very easy to manipulate. Let's take actually one example. Not a very bright person. Jackson Hinkle.
I've heard of him.
No, he's not a bright person. By the way, I don't think he cares at all about Israel or Jews.
Not one bit. We've argued with him.
Yeah.
Visegrad24 has interacted. He's been a very vocal critic of ours.
Yeah. Actually, I'm not even sure if he's an anti-Semite. I won't give him the credit of being anti-Semite. He doesn't care about things. What does he care about? Just getting traction. He posts things that I know for certain that he doesn't believe what he posts. He gets millions of likes. Many people pay his beloved $3. And this shows that if a single person can get such an audience, becoming one of the most influential accounts, surpassing Elon Musk.
For sure. Yeah.
But just spreading simple, mediocre misinformation, imagine what you can do with the powers of the state-sponsored misinformation. Much more resources, much more sophisticated. Every second post of Hinkle, he gets a misinformation tagged because he's just posting stupid things. Imagine people lying and countries lying in more sophisticated ways. Imagine AI being part of that. Nowadays, you can create AI-based audio clips and photos that they are indistinguishable from reality. One of my big concerns is that in this year, the big election year in the US, we are going to see lots of misinformation by many different players. It will be very difficult to know what's real and what's not. So yes, I am very concerned about that.
One of the most concerning things that I've seen was an NCRI report which showed that for every single pro-Israeli hashtag, be it bring them home, free the hostages, I stand with Israel on TikTok, there were 57 videos for the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas hashtag. So there was a disparity of 57-1. And what do you think should be done about it?
TikTok is very concerning, as we know. And I've spoken to, I post only on X, but many of my friends, colleagues that I interact with, they post on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok. And the impressions I've gotten from them, from all of them, is that TikTok is actively trying to suppress pro-Israeli content and amplifying anti-Israeli content. You see that. The fact that the Western world, we included, are just letting them do whatever they want. And Facebook is already for old people and Instagram for old people. All the teenagers are on TikTok, or so I am told. That is scary. Nobody reads the news. Actually, that's good. But the sources of information of people are becoming social media.
And influencers and disinformation actors and bad faith actors on those, influencing those young kids. The fact that the letter to America that bin Laden wrote 20-something years ago became viral, with young Gen Zers reading it and saying, I agree with Osama bin Laden, is insane. I mean, the insanity of it, and the fact that someone, or a group, or the CCP itself, orchestrated that disinformation campaign around that letter to America and made it go viral and influenced a wide spectrum of Western American children, teenagers, young adults, whose country was faced with one of the worst acts of terrorism. 3,000 people died in 9/11. And they're agreeing, 20 years later, they're agreeing with the man who orchestrated those attacks.
And many of them are from the best universities in the US. Supposedly they got the best education. And that's what's concerning. On one side, you have sophisticated players that are using everything in their disposal to influence you. On the other hand, instead of trying to put up a defense, you see all the best, so-called best academia in the West, the cultural leaders, they're doing everything to sabotage their own culture. I mean, they don't need to try, China and others try hard, actually. Look at what's happening in Harvard, in Berkeley, in Stanford. The entire disciplines in academia that are just invented, they're junk science, most of them. All the DEI, that now all the universities are going through, all the companies, diversity, equity, that is nonsense. And the West is kind of grabbing a big shovel and digging its grave. All the others need to do, just look and maybe help a little with the TikTok and contents. But we, as the West, we are doing everything wrong ourselves. Of course, we need to put a fight against that. But before that, we need to look internally and get our things together.
Eli, I want to end on an optimistic note. Is there any hope?
Yes. When I see the kind of traction so many people get on X, and it's indeed a microcosmos of the world, I get hope. For example, when I look at on the most influential lists, I see where Vicegrad is, and I compare Vicegrad to CNN, to CNBC, and all the others. That gives me hope. That gives me hope that there are still a big portion of intelligent people who are willing to give a fight, and they decide what they're following, that they read Weissgrad. They read Jordan Peterson's content and not all those woke academics. That some AI scientist out of nowhere gets 500,000 followers because what I write resonates with people. So there are people that still, there is still hope. What we saw in elections in Netherlands, in Argentina, there is still hope.
Dr. Eli David, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.